When I was a kid, I wanted God to say something special to me. Something beyond the fact that I was loved and created for a purpose. Everybody's loved and created for a purpose. I wanted my very own personal word from the Lord. I didn't really think God was going to audibly speak to me, and there was no way I was going to see a repeat of what happened in the book of Daniel when a giant hand magically appeared and wrote on the wall of the king's palace. But I did think that I could see if there was some way that God could use the very Bible I had on my shelf. And so I took it down, I put it on my desk, and I told God that I was going to flip it open at random and just point. I asked God if whatever verse I pointed to could tell me something, and the verse that I pointed to was Haggai 1:8. Go up to the mountain and bring the wood and build the house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. Haggai was a prophet for the people as they were coming home from 70 years of exile in Babylon. And the place where they were coming home to needed to be put back together. Specifically, God wanted the people to rebuild the temple that had been destroyed. But the people focused on their own houses instead. Through the words of Haggai, God was telling the people that if their community was going to survive, they needed to stop paying attention to just themselves and start focusing on the entire community. Now, when I was younger, this verse taught me that I couldn't be passive and that I couldn't wait for God to do everything. But today, after more than a year and a half of pandemic, it teaches me a different lesson. If communities like our church are going to thrive moving forward, we have to come together at a level we haven't in many years. We have to bring the wood, so to speak, and build God's house. One of the great things about the God we serve is this: God is active and moving throughout all of creation. You can look around and you can see that God's at work, and that's why it's humbling when we realize God still chooses to gather people like us together and to put us to work. For a few minutes, I want to talk to you about that work. If there was a prophet today telling us to go get wood and build God's house, what would that look like? What would it take to do it? For a lot of people, worship is the first and sometimes only connection they have with a church. Especially when we think about young families, we can recognize that people are busy, and so making a worship experience as excellent as we can is a top priority. Worship is the first and best form of Christian education. It's where we first learn that we are always already loved by God. It's where we come to know that we've been blessed to be a blessing. It's where we're given opportunities to practice our faith so that we can enjoy God and glorify God forever. Because of all this, you can see why we need to make sure we're making a good investment into our worship life. Here's what we know about what draws people to worship. People want to hear sermons that are relevant and Bible-based. They want preachers who've taken the time to study the Bible and connect those stories with the stories of our lives today. That's one reason we're committed to offering sermon series throughout the year. It's an easy way for us to apply the lessons of Scripture to situations that you and I encounter every single day. And we know that people want to sing. Oh, wow. Do people want to sing? St. Augustine said, when you sing, you pray twice. And that is certainly true for our congregation, isn't it? Plus, having top-rated musicians lead us only makes the singing sweeter, right? Friends, we want our worship life to be joyful. We want our worship life to be honest. Each one of us should feel eager to make it to one of our worship services each weekend because we know that we're going to leave feeling understood, we're going to feel supported, and we're going to feel equipped to be God's people in the world. For many of us, we have the space in our schedules and the desire to go deeper and to learn more about being Christ's disciples. And this is where spiritual formation comes in. Spiritual formation is more than just Christian education. It's about learning to embody a way of life. It's about forming habits. Pure education is important, absolutely. But as Christ's disciples, we're called to go beyond just learning information. The prophets talk about having God's laws written on our hearts. What we want is for each one of us to develop a Christian imagination. Here's what we mean by that. I'm a pastor. I see the world in a particular way. You may be an educator or an attorney or a construction engineer. And each one of us has a different imagination, a different way of seeing and approaching the world. Well, it's the same with our faith. We need to develop a distinctly Christian way of living and moving in the world. And so this means that we have Sunday school classes. It means we have retreats. It means we host speakers and go to conferences. It means we start by helping our children learn the absolute basics of the faith and support our youth as they start asking the big questions that we all ask, including, is this faith even for me? Between staff and curriculum and guest speakers and much, much more, spiritual formation is absolutely an investment worth making. Over the years, one of the most consistent aspects of our ministry at Westminster has been care and fellowship. Now, in our opinion, care and fellowship are two sides of the same coin. Friends, we can't deeply care for one another if we don't first deeply know one another. An idea that used to be explicit in our Presbyterian Church Constitution is this: the church is the provisional demonstration of what God intends for the world. In other words, people should be able to look at us and say, oh, so that's the way we're supposed to do it. Got it. One of our main jobs as church is to authentically demonstrate community. People have had enough fakery. They want to know that they can be real with people and that those people will be with them through thick and thin. That kind of community has been the hallmark of this congregation for decades, hasn't it? I mean, come on, talk to any member of the adventurers class, you know what I'm talking about, right? We want to maintain that robust emphasis on care and fellowship, especially as we continue trying to come out of this pandemic. People are looking for community. And a lack of community and fellowship is the number one reason why people leave churches. You may think it's a theological disagreement because that's sexy and it gets all the headlines, but week after week, people slip out the back doors of churches everywhere because they've made little to no connection with their fellow worshipers. When it all comes down to it, missions is the net result of all the worship and all the spiritual formation and all the care and fellowship. I think the mission statement of the first church I ever served says it better than anything else I've ever heard. This church does not exist for itself, but for the sake of the world for which Christ lived, loved, and died. Everything we do is to equip us to serve the world in its brokenness and need. Everything we do is about serving the world. We're putting a renewed emphasis on increasing our mission work this year, and one of our goals is to strengthen our historic partner relationships with organizations like Urban Mission, Spark, Infant Crisis Services, City Rescue Mission, Goodland Academy, the Sudden Infant Loss Support Group, Boys and Girls Club, and others. And in addition, we've decided to go big on all the feeding ministries that we're a part of, most notably Feed My Sheep. Part of our dream is for people to hear Westminster Presbyterian Church and say, yeah, I know about you all. You're that church that feeds people. The church that feeds people. That sounds pretty Christ-like to me. One of the reasons I'm excited about Westminster's future is because we have a chance to not only do this at our historic building on Chartel, but we can multiply our ministry at our Rockwell campus. The pandemic has given us an opportunity to reboot ministry at our campus in the northwest of the city. We can start by taking our incredible passion and gifts for worship and care and fellowship and introduce them to a whole new group of people. Studies show that if a church starts a new campus, they are able to reach people that legacy locations just don't attract. So within the next year, we are going to focus intently on our Rockwell location and bring the message of grace, peace, love, and justice to new segments of our city. And of course, we can do all this good work, but if nobody knows about it or knows about us, then we're missing so many chances to invite others into this incredible thing that we've got going. The world has been slowly shifting in the last 20 to 30 years away from legacy institutions like television and newspapers and onto the internet and through social media. But March of 2020 made everyone sit up and realize that we had no choice but to embrace digital ministry. It's not an option anymore. It's a vital component of spreading Christ's message of grace, peace, love, and justice. And so we need to invest not only in making worship available online, but also finding ways for people to connect with one another and helping them to engage our spiritual formation offerings. Now, I don't have to tell you, all of these ministries and all of these programs amount to very little if we don't have women and men to staff them, right? From our facility staff to our childcare teachers, from the people who answer the phones and provide administrative support, from the faithful souls in our kitchen, and the people who make sure that there's plenty of copy paper in the workroom, oil in the candles in the sanctuary, coffee in the pot out front. It takes a big team. Friends, more than 60 employees to keep a place like Westminster running. And especially now that we're back up to full strength, I have to tell you, it's a humbling, dizzying, and amazing thing to watch. Friends, as we look ahead to the ministry God is calling us to over the next year, your leadership is asking you to pray about what kind of contribution you can make to the next era of Westminster. You need to know that your leadership is 100% behind this vision. Your elected leaders, your deacons, elders, trustees, your volunteer leaders, your staff, and some faithful longtime members of our congregation have all stepped up, and they've not only pledged toward the budget, but they have renewed their commitment to serve with their time and with their expertise. Friends, because of the shape of my own career, I've had the benefit of seeing churches all over our denomination. I've seen churches of all sizes engaging in thriving, impactful ministry. I can tell you with confidence, Westminster is poised for a great future. And all it takes is you. We need you to help us build this house.